Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills. Whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together.
Well, how can positive communication change your leadership? How can positive communication change your team's culture? And let's just get it out there. Does it really matter? Leaders have been communicating negatively for a long time, and they sometimes find results with that kind of communication. Isn't our job as leaders to get things done? And sometimes we have to be matter of fact about it. And so does it matter if our communication's positive or negative? Well, today we're going to explore the oh my goodness. Let me pause right there. I'll fix that. We're going to explore the power of communication in our leadership, and specifically the power of our positive communication. I am beyond blown away. I'm so excited with our guest today. He is a professor of applied communication at the University of Arkansas. He is the co-author of a brand new book, Positive Communication for Leaders. Dr. Julien Mirivel, thank you so much for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and having fun together.
Absolutely. Well, hey, before we hop into the conversation, maybe you could share a little bit more about your story, who you are, what you do, kind of what's got you to this place.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. So I'm originally actually from France. I was born in Paris. And when I was 15 years old, I really wanted to learn English. So I flew from Geneva, Switzerland at the time, and landed at 15 years old in the middle of what seemed like the middle of nowhere, formerly called Iowa. And, I was picked up by a host family, and really I came to the United States to learn English. And I'm telling you this story because I think my first experience with the power of communication came from that experience.
Wow.
I didn't speak a word of English. I couldn't understand people. I couldn't interpret what they were saying. And so as a result, I became very quickly isolated. But the beautiful part of the story is that as I learned the language, as I improved my communication skills, guess what happened? I was started to build relationships with other people. It was actually communication that set me free.
Wow.
My whole entire adult life has been focused on communication. I ended up coming back to the United States. This year will be my 31st year. Actually, I celebrated my 30-year anniversary from landing in Iowa now 30 years ago on August 1st. And I became a U.S. citizen now a year ago. So a lot of kind of a big journey there. But I came back to the United States and fell in love with the study of human communication when I went to college. All of my degrees are in this field, and I've been now a professor here for almost 20 years at UA Little Rock. So that's the short story, and I'm happy to tell you more if you'd like.
Wow, that's incredible. So literally at 15, did you know any English, or it was just jump in the deep end?
I mean, I really was a jump in the deep end. Of course I could say hello, but when you think about what you need to know to even engage in a small conversation with someone, it takes a lot of skills. And I neither had the vocabulary, and I certainly didn't have, the ability to do it. I couldn't even really understand what people were saying. So, now when people hear me, many people don't even know that I'm not American. And in France, my family makes fun of me because when we go to France, the people say, "Oh man, your French is impeccable." And I say, "I am French. I really am the whole thing." But it's to the point where now people can't tell the difference. But I'm telling you, 30 years ago, I didn't speak really a word of English.
Wow. That is Wow, what an incredible story, and to be able to now teach communication after all of these years. What's one of your favorite parts of being a professor and being able to teach?
I mean, there's lots of favorite parts, but I would say, I really believe, I think what helps all of this is I really believe in the power of positive communication. I think that if you change your communication, you not only change your life, you not only create a revolution in who you are, but you're going to create a revolution in the world of your relationships. You're going to create a revolution in the world of your workplace. You're going to create a revolution in the world of your community.
Wow.
And so to me, that's the big thing. And we see it every day, right, with our students who transform their communication skills for the better, and their families are off for the better. Their workplaces are better. And the contribution that they make to society and our culture is better. So I think many aspects of being a teacher excites me, but the one thing that's the constant is really the power of communication and what it does when we learn it.
Yes. So let me ask you this question, because I run into this quite frequently as I lead training workshops in different companies. Sure. There's always that leader or two, and I get it. I'm a year away from 50. I'm sort of set in my ways and, some areas.
Sure.
But there's always that leader or two who goes, ugh, really? I communicate. I've been doing it fine for so many years. Why should I look to improve? Tell us why. Like, why is it so important to continually be on the lookout to, look for those ways to continue to improve?
Well, I think, first of all, it's fair to say that sometimes some people, have some natural skills that they bring to the table, and they may be able to do it better than some others. In my experience, though, our self-perception is always more positive than the way other people perceive us.
Yeah.
we give ourselves a lot of leeway, but when we do surveys and we ask employees to evaluate their leader, it's never as positive as what the leader says it is.
Right.
So that would be one reason. I think the second is that, to me, I've studied this my whole life. All of my degrees are in this art and science. I've published articles, I've written books, but I think anyone who communicates knows that, man, sometimes we face challenges, right? Whether that's as a father, as a husband, and especially as a leader. There are a lot of people, you're trying to create a team, there are pressures. So I think a lot of us understand that communication is a lifelong journey, and that, yes, we may have attained some degree of competency, but I don't think there's an end to the level of competence. There's no athlete in the world, top athlete, who thinks, I got this now. I don't need to practice it or learn or develop my art. No one says that. No one says that in art.
Right.
So communication skills to me are just the same way. They are a lifelong journey. The difference is this, that if you don't learn how to paint, yes, you rob us of a contribution to art, but you're not hurting other people. In leadership, that's not the case. Your leadership style can and often does hurt other people. It hurts their well-being. It sometimes even translates into affects people's home. It affects people's productivity.
Yep.
It affects their degree of happiness and hope and excitement and progress and desire and motivation. It has consequences.
Right.
So I should stop here, but you set me up beautifully, and I guess I feel very passionate that, yes, we can be resistant. And there are days, to be honest, where I think to myself, man, do I still have to work at this? I teach it. And the reality is, yes, it's not an end. It's not a state of being. It's a process.
Wow. That is powerful. As I picked up your book last week and have been going through it, I get to the second page. I'm much further along, but I get to the second page. I've been writing a book. And in the second page, you say positive communication will amplify your influence and impact immediately. And I almost wrote, very similar words in the book that I'm writing, Speak with People, Not at Them. And I started shaking my head. Yes. I'm like, cause I look up to leaders like yourself who have studied it. I don't have a degree in communication. I've spent, lots of time on stages, being paid to do those things, led lots of staff, lots of day to day. And as much as I can, I read books and articles and those kind of things. So to be able to see, in your book, I just absolutely loved it. And, can you just kind of walk us through? You've already kind of started doing that, but how does making the shift, to have positive communication, how does that change our leadership? Because for many leaders, it's been modeled to them that they can lead, they can communicate negatively, maybe speak out of fear or control or force.
Yes.
And so how does, making that shift actually change their leadership?
So, so first, if they make a change, they're inherently going to change their leadership and the outcomes, within that context. Couple things kind of crossed my mind. The first one is a story. So a year ago, I flew to Costa Rica to give a talk there about positive communication for leaders. I finished the day training. I go out to eat for dinner, and I'm eating by myself. So, I'm asked to basically eat at the bar in San Jose rather than at a table, which I say it's fine. So I'm sitting at the bar. Then, of course, another person comes in because they're also eating alone. And I just struck a conversation with them. Well, they turned out to be a leader from Japan who was traveling on business, and we start talking about leadership. And the beauty of it was that I had just spent an entire day giving a talk about how to transform your leadership approach. And here was a person sitting with me who was going through a paradigm shift of his own. He said, Julien, I've just not been a good leader. I've been actually a terrible leader. And I'm just now realizing he was in the middle of a kind of a leadership crisis. He said, when I walk to the office in the morning, instead of saying hi to my colleagues, I go straight to my office and go to work. When people come into my space, this is a high level executive. When people come into my office, I don't even acknowledge them. I've spent years, they would drop off papers and I'm on the computer typing away. And then I realized I am treating people as objects.
Wow.
And that is not who I want to be. And it certainly isn't good for what I want to create.
Yep.
And so I met this person who was trying to change his ways. He says when he gave people feedback for years, he realized that instead of acknowledging any strength, he would say, you're doing this wrong. Change it to this way. That was his way of giving feedback. And he was going through a paradigm shift. And I think my book with Alex Lyon is about making a similar shift. It's moving from transactional, object-driven communication to really a humane way of leading. Mm-hmm. So that's one part of the answer. The second part is this. Leaders who draw on positive communication and positive principles broadly will outperform other forms of leadership every day. And so think about it, right? Yes, leaders they can use aggression, they can use threats, they can use all kinds of other ways of getting people to comply. But what we know now with almost pretty much certainty based upon the research we currently have available, it's kind of a paradigm shift, is that actually positive approaches to leadership lead to stronger and extraordinary outcomes.
Wow. Which
include productivity, financial well-being of the organization, positive culture, and of course, well-being, retention of employees, I could list more. And then the expansiveness of the impact is doubled. And we're not counting, I'm sure you can think of it this way, when you look at your life, the people who invested in you positively, those are friends for life.
Right.
And the people who mistreated you, you don't want to be around them.
Right.
So even a kind of a philosophy, I think, that there is meaning in friendship, there's meaning in collaboration, And those approaches will, to me, beat the alternatives any day.
Wow. Just powerful. Just powerful.
Thank you so much.
I can remember I worked on an MBA years ago, probably 15 years ago. In one of our classes, they handed us Daniel Goleman's book, Primal Leadership. And it was kind of the first time I, had kind of dove into emotional intelligence. And in it, he makes the argument, right? Like your teams will actually be healthier and happier and more productive.
Yep.
When you tap into their positive emotions instead of their negative emotions. And it was mind blowing. I'm like, wait a minute. Do they actually know this? Because I've only seen modeled, the negative side of it. For our leaders who are, every day and they're trying to kind of take some steps to move forward, a little healthier, positive communication. What are a few, immediate things that they can begin adding to their communication toolbox to kind of start making that turn and to communicate in that positive way?
Hey, great question. And that's really why Alex and I wrote the book. In the book, 10 years ago, I developed a model of positive communication that I believe is at the heart of positive leadership, but it was designed to give people quick behaviors that they need to focus on to develop their communication skills. And just like I mentioned earlier, to me, those behaviors they're part of a lifelong journey. And they were like the fundamentals of positive and effective communication. Looks like this if I show it to you on the screen. The model. And in the book, I believe we feature it, and it's the backbone of the book. So the short answer, I'll start with a couple and then I'll pause. If you want me, I'll accentuate it. But a way to begin is to think about the importance of greetings and to think about the importance of creating opportunities for connection. It's just what we know today. Yeah, 40 years ago, that's not how people thought. But that doesn't mean that our thinking should not evolve. We have evidence now that, good leadership means involved leadership with the people you work with. And small things that you can do include checking in with your employees to see how they're doing, initiating contact. If you're working remotely, setting up a Zoom call just to check in.
Yes.
And have a short, small talk conversation with people. It includes, if there's a conflict, don't use the silent treatment. Instead, move again a little closer. Reinitiate the contact with people. So in the book, we describe several very small things you can do that exemplify why greetings are so important and how you as a leader can do that. So that would be one thing. The second behavior in the model is the power of questions. So small thing you have to do, you have to shift the questions you ask. It's very powerful. Like this morning, I just did a 4-hour training on leading difficult conversations.
Oof.
And you can read any book you want. And I promise you, there's no way you can learn how to handle a difficult conversation unless you know how to begin with questions.
Wow.
It's the opposite, right? Most people are like, I have something to say. I need to blame this person. But really, our theory and our research is teaching us, hey, actually, why don't you start discovering the other person? Where are they? What are they thinking? How are they feeling? That changes the whole pattern. So I would say if you want to make a move towards positive leadership, then begin with big questions. So I'll start there. Is this helpful?
Oh, absolutely.
And
this is spectacular.
What else can I do for you?
I love it. No. So, okay, let's drill into the second for questions, because for me, I feel like I have, I talk about this in our Speak with People's training. We need to move past the day of either not asking questions or asking boring questions. And when you say big questions, kind of give us a few examples of that and kind of what that does to, stoke the connection.
Yeah. So one thing, yes, you're totally right. And I like that the way you said it, like boring questions, right? Often we use questions to control interaction. So the biggest difficulty I see is people are in a hurry. They're focused on the work rather than the person, and they're focused on outcomes rather than the process. And what that does is it guides our questioning to be simply about that. So the first thing I would think about is, are you asking only questions about work, or are you asking questions that cultivate relationship?
Wow.
Like, simple difference. How is this project coming along? Great question. It's open-ended. It's work-related. But what sometimes if you say, how's your family doing? You need both, right?
Right.
What we're arguing in the book is you need both approaches: task orientation, relationship orientation. Now, your point to boring questions, what I showed, for example, this morning is that the questions we ask shape what our relationship's all about. So if you ask boring questions, you get boring relationship. If you ask meaningful questions, you get meaningful relationship. So as a leader, I would spend some time discovering my team. Like, what are you really passionate about? What are you really dreaming about for your career? How can I help you get there?
Yep.
What are some strengths that you have that you think I should bring forth for this team? What is it that you don't like to do, really, that you think maybe somebody else would be better at? You kind of have to go on a discovery and trust that process will lead to stronger connections.
Wow.
Hopefully that helps.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, sometimes, especially some of the training I do is with financial advisors, and they'll want to just jump right to the products and, questions about that,
Yes.
but they miss, their clients' dreams and their story and, some of those questions that tap into those feelings, so they know, hey, this is what our, client's dreaming about. So it's so important, probably in any industry that you lead, to be able to lead that way. Are there some, key open-ended questions that, come to mind that we should maybe put in our, arsenal, or any questions that, kind of warrant keep those close to the toolbox? Like if you're in a networking meeting, or, you're building team chemistry.
Yeah. I mean, so many. In the book, essentially, the whole chapter offers there's 100 examples of great questions to ask. Because you know what? Great questions will depend on the context in which they're needed. So,
yes.
But an easy one for networking that I really like is simply tell me about your story. What's your story? And that can just get people started. Like, we were at a dinner. Actually, my colleague and I, Alex, were about to do a training. And so we went out to dinner with the people who organized our invitation to do this training. And Alex practiced this beautifully, actually. And so we started the whole dinner by him asking, hey, tell me the story, your professional story, or your story. I can't remember. Tell me your story, I think is all he said. And then somebody else says, how far do you want me to go? And he said, as far as you want to. And so suddenly people were sharing about their family ancestry and where people came from.
Wow.
And that single question, I mean, I doubt anyone would forget this dinner, honestly. Because for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, all we did was respond together to this one question, which led to obviously more questions. So that, finding some hook like that can be really powerful.
Wow.
I think sometimes asking your team to recalibrate purpose. What are we trying to accomplish together? What is our common purpose in listening to what people think it is? Or what would be extraordinary goals that we could shoot for together?
Yeah.
Going on that discovery to me will shape it. So in the book, we do provide a lot of exemplars. One of my favorite is about the annual evaluation process, where most people think, let me give this person a bunch of feedback. We did a case study of an organization that changed their culture simply by changing the questions during the annual evaluation process.
Wow.
And instead of giving feedback, they would say things like, how can we best serve you this year? What are some development opportunities that you need to succeed and develop as a person? How can we support you in the next 5 years to reach your professional goals? They just had 10 questions like that to get going. Notice every question I have given you are open-ended questions and not closed-ended questions. To me, that's a key variable.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So what was it like co-writing a book together? What was it
Oh, hard.
Yeah.
But with Alex, I would say fun. We're kind of a perfect match. When we work together, I think we're both, writing a book from my vantage point, I'm a very disciplined person. So I'm somebody who works at writing every day. If I have a book project, then that's what I'm doing Monday through Friday. And I work like that every single day.
Yep.
And then I see where I end up every week. So Alex and I were very good about being disciplined, and we were very good about supporting each other and really being open to each other's feedback. So yeah, I think really listening deeply to each other. If people had concerns, then I think we tried our very best to honor those. But I honestly would tell you that I could write a book by myself. This is my 4th book.
Yeah.
But I think this book reached a higher level of quality because of my friendship and partnership with Alex.
Wow. Well, I joked with a friend because I was telling them about you coming on the podcast, and I said, it's kind of like 2 of the Avengers teamed up to write a book. I'm like, I was like, wow, this is a lot of communication powerhouse. I just absolutely love it. I mean, it's been,
Hey, thank you so much.
It's been huge.
Yeah, thank you I mean, I think of Alex as the top Avenger here. I can promise you. He's definitely more popular than me, but I think our strength really matched each other, and I can't wait to write another book with him when the time is right.
I love that. Okay, so with higher learning and, you especially teaching generations. So one of the interesting things that we have now in the world is there's 4 generations working together, sometimes even 5 if the silent generation, still kind of slips in and are working.
Sure.
Each generation, boy, their communication styles are, so different. So maybe we could just kind of give some advice for, next gen or boomers as they lead Gen Z, and those millennials, because, I mean, it's a fascinating study when you think about Gen Z being digital natives and not knowing, what it's like to not have all the information, in a split second and, now leading. So maybe we could just start with, some advice as leaders lead those younger leaders, how to communicate with them, how to lead them well.
Yeah. And that's a real, I was realizing as you were asking that question that I need to learn more and understand even more the differences. I would say that in our book, we didn't attack that topic as much as probably we should have, kind of looking back and hearing your question. So, and this may not be the answer you want, but in general, I think that we overplay the differences, to be honest. Yes, there are cultural differences, right? Between French and American culture, between Japanese and Chinese culture. Like, we know that there are differences. But I always try to remember as a communication scholar that we are more similar than we are different. And yes, I see differences with the way that just the other day, my teenager told me he had a great conversation with his friend. So I asked him to tell me about it. And he said, yeah, we texted for an hour. That was like his notion of what a great conversation was. And that's not what I had in mind.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, both him and I across time are looking for connection with the people we care about. And the way to get there hasn't really changed.
Wow. Yes.
To me, it hasn't changed. And, again, this is maybe not what you were hoping to hear, but I think that there's one thing I do appreciate about my model, that I don't make it about massaging these differences. You want to communicate well, then listen deeply to the difference.
Yep.
Try to discover what people really care about. Try to be attentive and engage in dialogue. And that, to me, all generations should try to do. No one has mastered this. And perhaps, Now we do teach communication more than we did 40 years ago. I mean, so many students across universities are required to take a communication class.
Right.
So it's very likely that now students, of the 20s, are probably early 20s, late 20s, are bringing that to the table already. They have that understanding. So embrace the difference, and just as you would crossing cultural landscape, I think don't be attached to your way of thinking. Try to discover the other, because there's value probably in both.
Wow.
Or
I
all
love
four,
that.
to use your 4 generations.
Oh, I love that. That is so helpful. So often it seems like, as I'm talking with leaders, they're frustrated and upset. Only if the younger generations do this, and then sometimes the younger will be like, well, only if the older. And to be able to take a step back and go, you know what? But this is brilliant. Let's embrace the differences, and let's not be so attached to our way. And if we really do listen, I mean, just powerful things can happen. Oh, I love that. That is so good.
Yeah. So right now you're making me think. I'll put it in another kind of a quote, but there's the Prince Sultan from Saudi Arabia, the first Arabic person to travel into space. And after coming back from that experience, he said this. He says, he was International Space Station. And he said, the first day we were all pointing to our countries. The second day we were all pointing to our continents. Ooh. But by the third day, we were only aware of one Earth. And to me, that's kind of like that. Yes, there are differences.
Yep.
But, we're also all human. When you study all cultures, they have dominant values that tend to transcend those differences. And I think we can work with right communication, good communication, positive communication. I think we can overcome those differences, no problem.
Wow, I love that. So as leaders are on this path to improve and trying to do kind of some self-assessments, what are, maybe some of the markers along the way that they can kind of check in and go, okay, how am I doing here? How am I doing here? What are there some exercises or, some things some disciplines they should do to kind of keep in that self-assessment process?
Yeah, that's a great. So again, I would show my model and just start hammering at those questions. Am I reaching out to my colleagues? Am I initiating contact? Am I reinitiating contact when there's a conflict? And I would go through our book and start to assess. And actually, the last chapter in our book is a worksheet plan for kind of building your communication skills. But it has to be very practical. Challenge yourself. We don't want to just read about communication. We have to do it. Yeah. So invite 3 people to lunch next week. If you want to build connection, we can think about it. We can talk about it. But that doesn't do anything for connection. The other thing I would do if I were a leader that I do teach is you need to do an employee engagement survey just even for your team. In our book, we introduced the 12 questions of employee engagement by Gallup. It's like super easy. Just ask your team to take it. And one of the questions in the survey is, I have been praised for my work in the last 7 days. That question is critical. Are you like complimenting your employees? Are you building strength? Because we know performance is impacted by what you say and do. And the research is very clear. When you focus on people's strength, you improve performance. When you focus on people's weaknesses and criticize and blame, you decrease performance. You undermine it. So I would assess that way, and then maybe do it in a year and see where you are. Are you making progress? Are you moving the needle? And then the last thing, again, I have tools that are available if people are interested, but a self-assessment survey, a 360 survey using my model can be really effective to get that feedback. Because sometimes, again, as I said early on, our self-perception does not match our other perception.
Right.
And you want to get both. Because your perception matters. but so does other people. And seeing where it aligns and maybe where it differs can be really meaningful.
Wow. I absolutely love
But
it.
enjoy the journey. I mean, it's, communication, I think, can really enrich your life at work and at home.
As you mentioned the last chapter, as I've kind of gone through it, the chart, that kind of breaks down the create and discover and affect and deepen and give and transcend. I mean, I went through kind of many of my leadership positions and, thinking through, if I would have had this, this would have helped me create quite a communication plan. I mean, this in itself is just, an invaluable tool to leaders to be able to, think of that. I speak with people. We have a weekly blog. And so I was writing a blog about how in our leadership, especially if we lead people, we need to be a planner as opposed to a plopper. And I was thinking about some of the places that I've worked where, a boss will come in and then just plop information. By the way, we hired this person.
Yeah.
By the way, we did this. And, in the grand scheme of things, they're allowed to do that. They have the boss.
Sure. Okay.
But if you have a plan and you roll it out and you positively communicate some of that instead of just springing, I mean, the power of the team really does get amplified. And I just love how your book, you just keep that theme through the entire thing. Like your influence will be amplified. And I mean, what leader doesn't want their influence to grow and to expand and to learn?
Yeah. And to create, I think in the end, we are hoping that people will create meaningful relationships along the way, So I was trying to write a LinkedIn post today for tomorrow, actually. So hopefully it'll come out on LinkedIn tomorrow. But I had lunch with my colleague that I've known now for 19 years. And think about how much time we spend at work. And how alone, I mean, the research now is showing how alone people are, how lonely they feel in the workplace. And obviously, I'm lucky that's not my experience. But, friendship in the workplace gives us meaning. It gives us joy. It gives us happiness. And it has organizational value in that people who feel like they have social support, are more willing to give of themselves to the company. They're more willing to produce and really achieve better goals. So to me, it's not just about the organization. I think you can have an even more meaningful life that has, that includes the notion of meaningful connection with other people.
Yep. What's so fascinating about that is one of the banks that I'm doing some training for is they want me to develop a training to teach their licensed bankers how to communicate in a healthy way when right to their right is their screen with the AI questions. And so they're talking to their potential client. The AI is asking questions. So the banker is putting it in, going back and forth. So they're trying to utilize the AI with real conversation. And what they find is the bankers becoming kind of robotic in their communication because they're just reading off the questions and not really, giving their full attention to the person.
Engaging. Yeah.
Yes. So I didn't put this on our questions. I apologize, but I, just was wondering what you think, kind of future looking forward with the unbelievable advances AI is making, every single day. It seems like there's something different. Do you think our connection will decrease because we have all this new technology, or do you think it's just going to do the reverse and just continue? We're just going to continue to be drawn towards more of that deeper connection with people.
Oh man, that's such a philosophical question and a great one.
Sorry.
So I think of the famous psychologist Carl Jaspers, who I'm not going to be able to quote it directly, but he says something along those lines, that our quest for closeness will never end because we are in an ever expanding perimeter of communication.
Wow.
And so our task will remain to come closer and closer in spite of that expanding perimeter of communication. And I mean, I don't know if people will find this interesting, but I do, so I'll say it anyway. But I was realizing, I was reading a book the other day, and I was teaching to some of my freshman students, actually. So it's going to be a little professorial. But 2,500 years ago, Plato wrote a book called Phaedrus. And again, I'm not a philosopher, but one of the things that I found really interesting about the whole story was that in the book, Socrates is very concerned about the arrival of the written word. And think about how powerful this was. It was the first time in history when something that was said moved beyond the body itself, meaning it would live on forever. And today we can read a book and enjoy it that was written 2,500 years ago. But that was about the same time that this happened. Yep. So our worry today is not that different. It's like, think about artificial intelligence. Who is saying the words? Where are they coming from?
Right.
And so to me, Carl Jaspers is right. We are in an ever-widening perimeter of communication, and we're going to have to find real ways of staying connected. Wow. Think about how many organizations moved to become totally virtual. Or think about the fact that in 2024, I'm a full-time faculty member, but the first time that I have been in the classroom was last week.
Wow.
For the first 8 months, I was totally online. An ever-widening perimeter of communication, which to me is going to make the skills that we're talking about together even more relevant. Because the thing to not forget about communication is that just like I had to learn a second language, it is a muscle. If you do not use that muscle, you lose the capacity for communication, which means you would lose your capacity for connection. And so we're going to have to practice over and over and over again how to retain our communication skills so we can stay connected to one another.
Wow. My goodness. Thank you so much. I mean, I took a page of notes. I know this is going to be so incredibly beneficial for our listeners. My goodness.
Oh, good.
Absolutely.
Good.
Well, before I let you go, let me ask you a few rapid fire questions. We're building this resource for leaders. And so is there a speaker? Is there someone who every time you hear them, deliver a keynote or if it's a TED Talk or YouTube, you just find yourself forwarding that, message on because it's so profound? Is there someone in that category that you say, wow, people need to listen, watch them?
Oh man. Well, right now I'm reading the new book by Susan Cain, Bittersweet. I think that she has a way of framing ideas that are really powerful. So that's who I'm thinking about right now. I think Adam Grant obviously has a way of showing connections in a novel way. So those are the two people I think about right now.
I love it. Are there any podcasts that you find yourself listening to, either guilty pleasure if you love true crime stuff or history, or on the development side that you just find yourself going back to?
Yeah, well, to be honest, not really. I cannot get inspired by the moment. So I did the most recent podcast I listened to was on World War II and on D-Day particularly because I took my family to Normandy this summer.
Oof, wow.
And so, as a French American, I visited Omaha Beach and I wanted to be prepared. So the last podcast I listened to was an in-depth look at D-Day and how the Allied forces responded to this historical moment.
Wow.
Really in our lives, So that's really what I'm thinking about. And then, so I don't have one podcast that I listen to. I try to pay attention to. So I'll just plug in yours. I think your podcast is amazing and people should keep on listening to it. And I appreciate the work you're doing to bring novel voices and inspire people along the way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, hey, where can we send our listeners to find out more about you and connect with you online?
Perfect. Several places. Please connect with me on my website. It's julienmirivel.com, like my name. When you get there, you can sign up for my free 9-day email class on positive communication. So you get a daily email to inspire you to practice what we described in the show. And then the second place is LinkedIn. I try to be active there, and I hope that you can come befriend me, and so we can continue to grow and learn together. Those are the two places. Our book, Positive Communication for Leaders, is available on Amazon. You can also check it out at positiveleaders.com. And hopefully that will help you.
Well, the book is absolutely fantastic. I am loving it. And I'm halfway through your email challenge. So I have very much
awesome.
Yes, very much enjoyed those as well. Thank you again. Really appreciate you lending your voice to this interview.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity to dialogue with you and for your wonderful questions. And hopefully this was helpful in some way, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you, our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.